Hey, so I just remembered that I'm supposed to be making devlogs about my game, and I haven't done that for months because I've been so busy working on the actual game, and there's a bunch of progress to show. First and foremost, we have this. The game actually starting to kinda look like a video game, and on top of that, also sound like a video game. Those two things weren't what I've been doing over the past couple of months. That's entirely due to the ridiculously talented and kind people who've been helping me out, getting this current build of the game looking and sounding the way it does now. I will leave links to everybody who has helped me build this up, from the sound design, to the environment art, to the new weapon model that I have. Everybody's links will be down below for you to go check out and show some love. While they've been doing that, I've been focusing on what I do best: programming, and of course, tinkering with the game design on top of that. Originally, you might know, each dungeon was built around a pretty simple setup. Each one has 3 keys that you need to get to open the boss door, and of course then the whole idea of the game is beat all of the 6 bosses and go face the final boss. Each of these keys came with its own kind of trial. One focused on combat, one focused on platforming, and one that would have the player engage with some sort of different genre, like a minigame, or a distraction to break up from all the heavily combat-based gameplay. Which, on a practical level, worked well enough, but the more I built, the more I kinda realized that that was off. There were actually 2 separate issues here. The first one was the platforming levels, which just weren't a lot of fun. The jumps felt fine enough, but everything in between the jumps themselves was way too boring, kinda awkward, and building obstacle courses for my character to platform through proved to be really difficult. Now, that might just be a skill issue on my end, but I think there's another element here that I'll circle back to in a second. Because the second issue was the keys themselves. They felt completely artificial. Why are these keys here? Who left them there? Why do they open those specific doors? They just exist there as collectibles and are very video gamey, because that's just what games do. They don't really feel like they're part of the world, and they're not giving much reasoning. Now, I could of course add some of that, and that would have originally been the plan, but I came up with a different plan. It ties back into the platforming. Because I needed to improve that anyway, I went back to play a couple of games that I think do platforming really well, such as A Hat in Time and Super Mario Galaxy. And what I found is that they really shine because they have a wide pool of movement abilities for the player to use, letting the player string together these moves into a sort of platforming flow state. And my game had a jump and a dash, and that's it. So I gave some more freedom of movement to my player character as well. I added a double jump, a wall jump, a grappling hook, and I separated my dash into a ground dash and a separately unlockable air dash. All that was kind of cluttering up my code though, so mostly for organizational purposes initially, I moved all of those different types of jumps and movement things into their own abilities, using the gameplay ability system. However, the moment I did that, I realized, now that they're their own abilities, it would be super easy to make all of these unlockable. And that is the moment that a bunch of things just came crashing together and clicked in my head. There's a whole bunch of design decisions that I've been making over the past year that seem to have now finally come together. Because instead of fixing the keys feel out of place situation, I can just take those keys and instead give these movement abilities at those points. So the movement abilities become the keys for progressing forward. You have this ledge that's too high to jump over with a single jump. Well, when you get the double jump, you can come back here, and now this suddenly very much is reachable. So we've had a lock and a key without it literally being a video game collectible lock and key. But if the keys are going to be all full-on gameplay abilities for your movements, 3 per dungeon, 6 dungeons for the entire game, that would be 18 movement abilities in total, which seems a little excessive. So I'm gonna cut back on those to say 2 per dungeon, giving a total of 12 throughout the entirety of the game. The past 3 years, I've been telling everybody that I've been making a game heavily inspired by Kingdom Hearts, and that still is very much true in a lot of different ways. But The way that I've been setting up my dungeon structure, even without meaning it to, doesn't really vibe that well with the main Kingdom Hearts gameplay. What it vibes with instead very well, again, without me really intending it to do so, is serving as the playground for a Metroidvania. I'm sure that a lot of you were listening to me explaining movement abilities as keys and came to this same conclusion. It's kind of funny how I ended up reinventing the wheel in recreating the concept of a Metroidvania through entirely evolution of this game on its own. Since very early on in development, the game's been telling me it doesn't want to be Kingdom Hearts, it wants to be Hollow Knight. And I decided, you know what, let's hear you out. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm just going to be making Hollow Knight, but it's in 3D, even though that would be a really, really good YouTube thumbnail. Now, what I'm making, I would call more of a Metroidvania RPG. In a typical RPG, you fight enemies, that makes you stronger, which makes you take on stronger enemies, which makes you grow quicker. In a typical Metroidvania, you explore, you find tools that help you explore more, and the world map grows as a result of that. You can't just throw these things together into a game without thinking of how they might conflict or how you're going to integrate them. Which brings me to my level up system, which has needed a major update anyway for a while now. It seemed like the answer to allow me to bridge the gap between these two concepts and even melt them together into a strong backbone that would actually be the center of my game's identity. The answer is a skill tree, which has been a whole adventure of its own. I do not have the time to dive into all that today, but in short, I've made a custom editor within Unreal for my skill tree assets, which I might make a video about in the future. If you're interested, leave a comment below on whether or not you want me to ramble about that as well. A skill tree isn't really the right way to put this either. It's more of a skill web, inspired by Final Fantasy X Sphere Grid, but again, I probably want to make a separate video about this whole skill tree thing, so we'll talk about it there. In short, each node in this web can represent anything, a stat boost, an ability to unlock, anything I want, really. Each one also allows me to put in a method to unlock. For the most part, of course, that's just going to be experience that you've gathered. But it's coded in a way that it allows me to check for any arbitrary thing. So I can very easily look a certain skill, or maybe even an entire section of the skill tree, behind, let's say, having a certain item in your inventory. So let's imagine this. You find an item in the world behind a tricky bit of wall jumping. That item then allows you to unlock a new node in your skill tree that upgrades your fire spell. And suddenly remember, wait, there was a flame-themed door a while back that I couldn't open, so you can go back and check that out now. Now it's not just two systems living side by side anymore, or even three systems if you count the inventory as something separate, but it's one cohesive loop where every discovery in both sides matters. So that's where it all clicked. This is not a RPG with exploration, this is not a Metroidvania with stat points, this is a Metroidvania RPG. Both genres are fully blended together, not just pushed together into the same container. Taking away either of these sides at this point would leave the other one not function properly. They fully depend on each other to make this a functioning game. Which means, in my opinion at least, they have been successfully merged and integrated into a single powerful foundation to build my game on top of. Now all that means that we're going to go through another round of proper testing soon. The current build of the game is specifically made as a test for these concepts. So it's a condensed version of the game. The scale of it is fairly small. Proportionally, the amount of unlocks that you can get is way too high for the amount of rooms that there are. The exploration side is a little limited as a result of that. But if you're interested in helping me test this thing, there is a link to the Discord server down below, which is where I usually post updates about this sort of stuff and communicate with people testing. Mind you, this very much is a test that specifically is made to be a test. This is not an early access version of the game. A lot of what you're going to be seeing here specifically is set up for testing reasons. But if helping me test that and helping me shape this game into what it can eventually become sounds enticing to you, I'm always happy to have more people test my game. For now though, I gotta head back into my GameDevCave and get working on this thing again. You can subscribe to the channel if you've enjoyed this and hit that bell icon, and I will see you all next time. And a very big thank you to all my Patreons. You can see them on screen right now. If you want to help support the channel or get any of the project files in any of my tutorials, there's a link down below to the Patreon page to support me, or alternatively as a YouTube member. My Cave Students tier supporters, Oiku, Earl, Nonseville Urno, and my Cave Digger tier supporters, Mauricio Farias.